Sure, this is a nice beaded toggle clasp, but we can do better. Today, I'm going to get your imagination fired up for the endless possibilities for embellishing and using a simple peyote loop. Stay tuned for a dozen ideas to get you started. Hey there, Sandy here. Welcome to another creative tutorial at keepsakecrafts.net. We're going to start with the completed peyote stitch loop. This is tubular peyote stitch. The pattern is from Potomac Beads. It's part of their Gemini beaded toggle and bracelet. I'm not going to steal their pattern. You can go to their YouTube channel. I'll link it, and you can watch the video tutorial on how to make it. She does a really good job of explaining all the steps. What I've done here to make it a little bit easier for you to see is use larger beads. I've used 11 and 8s. The bracelet toggle uses 15s and 11s. I've also done one more thing here to help you see what's going on, and that is to make this outer row of beads in a different color. The way this design works is you start off with a ring of peyote stitch with smaller beads. So on the bracelet toggle they're 15s, on this they're 11s. And this ends up being the inmost part of your ring, just like on this one. These gold 11s are the inmost part, and you start here. Then you stitch 3 rows of peyote stitch with the larger beads. So here you can see I have my 11s, those are the gold ones, and then I have 1, 2, 3 rows with 8 O's. In this case I've done 2 of them in the turquoise and the 3rd one in the white, which is what ends up being this outer row. Then what you do to make your toggle, your tube, is you travel back to the other side of that peyote stitch and you do 2 rows with the larger beads. And then this folds up like a taco, and you can kind of see how they all meet, and you stitch them together, so you end up with this. Now you have your ring made and are ready to embellish. If it isn't already, bring your thread out of one of the beads on the outer row. Now you can string on however many seed beads will fit in between each of those of the outer row. Or we can do it different ways. I'll show you more. 3 often works really well. So I have 3 11-O's, and I'm just going to go into the next bead in that outer row. And sometimes you have to give them kind of a tug so that the one in the middle stands up. So you could do it this way, just adding 3 beads, or 1, or 2, or 7, or whatever you want. Experiment with different numbers. You just let your imagination take you to different patterns, but see how you can just get that little picot around the outside. In this loop with the 15s and 11s, I used 5 15s between every other bead in the outer row. And that is why I have 10 scallops. I'll show you what that looks like on this bigger one. So I'm coming out of this one right here. I'm going to skip the next one on the outer row and go into the second one from where I'm coming out. And so now you get a slightly different look, which is what I have here. You'll see that by how many beads you add and how you space them, you can really change up the look. You can also crowd them in, and that will give you a ruffled look. Here I've added 5 beads without skipping one, and you can see that it's kind of turned sideways because they're so crowded. And so you can get ruffles and frills by adding lots of beads in between. Once you've gone all the way around with your seed beads, now you can start adding in any beads you like, including more seed beads. For this one, I did half of it with the 3 beads in between every one on the outside, and then the other half I did 5 with every other. So you can see it gives you a different look. And then on this one, I did the 5 on every other. Now what you'll need to do is step up through your beads that you have added in this last row. So it depends on really what you're doing, which beads you step up through. We'll start out here by going through, coming out of the center bead in our group. And then add just a little Czech fire polish. These are 3mm Czech fire polish. So I'm coming out the center one in my set of 3, so I'm going to go through the center one and the next set of 3. And that sits in there very nicely. Here's a little sampler for you where I did just that. You could add those all the way around. You can add drop beads, which are kind of fun, and this might require a little bit of experimenting. These are 3.4mm drops. Now if I add them between these center beads. Bead on there. You can see there's way too much thread. So you can do a couple things. You could add maybe some smaller seed beads on either side. Or what you can do instead is come out different beads in your sets. I'll show you what I mean. So here I am coming out of the center bead, or the second one in my set of 3. But if I come out the third one, then add my drop, and then I'll go into the first one on the next row, and we'll have to step up through all of them, of course. But you can see how much better that fits because the base of this drop is narrow. It tucks in there very nicely. Here I've done this on the sampler. Here are the drops coming out of the first and last beads in the set, and they fit nicely. And here where the thread is going through the center beads in the set, they're loose and floppy and a lot of extra thread. You might be able to add longer drop beads like these mini daggers. Whoops, I gotta step up. But it really depends on the size and shape. You just have to find a size and shape that fits in there nicely. So here I am coming out through the center beads. You can see here it's a little loose and floppy coming through the center beads, and it's really way too tight. There's no room for them in between the first and last beads. So these ones really wouldn't work well, but they might in a different situation. You can also just add some plain round beads. You might have to do some experimenting to figure out which beads they fit best in between. So those look nice there. And you can see 4 of them here. They just add some more dimension, and it's nice as you get further out from the center, you can use bigger and bigger beads. You can also add any number of seed beads. Here I've added 5, 4, 3, and 2 to show you the difference in the look. The more you add, the more lacy and pointy the look you will get. But you don't have to stop here. You can keep going around adding more beads, and they can start getting larger the further out from the center you get, as there's more room. I've stepped up to where I need to, and I'm back to the start where I added these Czech fire polish. I could come in with maybe another 5, and I'll just go into this seed bead in between them and see how that looks. Oh, that's pretty nice. And you can just keep going around and around and building it further out. I'll show you more on that concept later. In my toggle here, all I did was I came in and added 2mm crystals in between each of those sets of 5. So now that you know how to decorate this tubular peyote ring, I promised you a dozen ways to use it. Hey there, Sandy here, just with a quick pause to let you know if you love content that stretches your creativity and explores beyond the obvious, you should become a patron and get more of that kind of content every month. These wonderful people, my patrons, not only get bonus tutorials, they get weekly behind the scenes and sneak peeks into my creative process. You can learn more at patreon.com/SandySeowen. And back to the video. Number 1 is, of course, this focal toggle. So even if the closure of your bracelet turns right side up, which they always do, you're kind of glad because it's so pretty. Number 2 is pretty much what we have right here. Use slightly larger beads and you have yourself a necklace pendant, maybe decorated all consistent. Number 3 is to combine the 2 previous ideas and make it a toggle that is the focal of your necklace, but make it into a lariat, kind of like this one. But instead of glass, your ring is made of beads. You can even go ahead and make the tubular peyote toggle bar and add some dangles to it for movement. Number 4 is super simple. If you prefer oval shapes to round, you can simply squish your ring into an oval. If you're using the larger one as a pendant, you could dangle a bead or a charm right in that lovely little oval space. Number 5 is pretty cool. It's to use these loops as links on a chain. And look, they squish into ovals all by themselves. If you want to do that, what you will have to do is to make one, finish it, and then for the next one, You string your beads to start the foundation of your peyote, and what you have to do is slide it through that ring and then build your peyote right in that ring. So I would go through the first one here, pull up my ring, and start building my peyote stitch right here. So you'll have to just kind of rotate it around the other ring, and you build them all like this. These are just simple tubular peyote links. Of course, if you make 2 of these, you can add ear wires and have a really cute pair of earrings. Number 7 might take a little bit of trial and error to get sized right, but you could actually use this as a ring. I would suggest only adding your decorations between 5 or 6 of the outer beads so that it's comfortable to wear. This next one might also take some trial and error to figure out the sizing, but if you make it big enough, you can have a bangle bracelet. I wouldn't recommend doing the decorating on the outside because these kinds of bracelets roll on and off, and the decorations would get in the way. This one isn't peyote, it's tubular netting, but it would have a similar look. Number 9 is just how to use that decoration trick I showed you. If you look carefully at any peyote bezel around a crystal or stone, you will realize that it is just the same as the outside of our tubular peyote, and you can decorate it in the exact same way. Here I just added the little white beads in between those outer beads, but I could have kept going and made it bigger and bigger and fancier and fancier. How about making it into a Christmas wreath ornament? You could add beads to the outside as well as the inner areas, maybe even stitch on a little bow charm. I'll link to the tutorial for this one by Ruth Keel. For number 11, let's look back at our partially completed sample here. So here's that inner part with the smaller beads, and then here are these beads here. Now what if instead of sewing this up right now, I just kept going around and around and made this very wide before I sewed the outside edges together? It might end up looking something like this one. This is a design from Bead and Button magazine from years ago. The designer used all kinds of beads, super duos, pearls, crystals. You could really get creative with this. And finally, who says you have to use the same colors on both sides? Do the same design with the same kinds and sizes of beads on each side, but switch up the colors and make yourself a reversible pendant. Now that you know how to jazz up peyote stitch, you'll want to keep growing your skills by checking out my Beyond the Basics beading playlist. Happy creating!